All right, so we're recording now. I'm here together with Maarten and Martin, and I asked these guys to join me on this session about the build consumer POM. It's a topic. We've been discussing it for quite a while now, and now we're at some point where we say, okay, let's share this information with everybody. Hope that everybody understands what kind of huge improvement this will be. So I hope these two guys will ask the questions you were also wondering. Otherwise, just let us know afterwards. Are you ready, guys?
Sure thing.
Okay, let's go.
Let's go.
So the main goal of the whole concept of build consumer is we want to work on a model 500. So most of people know that right now you have to say 400 in every of your POM files. But we want to improve it. So one of the issues is, why can we not change it right now? Well, the issue is that this current model version is used everywhere. And it is also understood by a lot of tools. So it's not only Maven that's using it, but also CI servers, some quality servers, but also other build tools. Most of them understand the model version. So if we would introduce some changes, they might break. And although the POM file has an XSD to verify if the elements and so are all valid, we know that not everyone is using them. So, and right now, if you upload an artifact, you must always provide a POM file as well. And this must be a 400 version. Because this is the one that's being consumed all the time. So if we would change that, we would break probably a lot of builds. Makes sense, right?
What do you mean with consumed? Like consumed by those tools, you mean, for example?
So if you specify a dependency in your POM file, what Maven will do, it will try to download that POM file. And that's what I mean with consuming. So you didn't write that POM file yourself, but you're consuming somebody else's POM file.
Right. And then if I would produce a POM 500, but you are using another version of Maven, which doesn't understand that version of the model, then your build will break because I am using a newer tool.
Exactly. Yeah. So the whole idea is that we will always try to upload a 400 version, so everybody will still understand it. And this model, it's already around for like 10 years, and it's not perfect, but it seems to be good enough to work with all kinds of things. Okay, so we have a couple of known issues already that we want to improve. So one of the things is that the logic right now is in the tool. So you specify your set of direct dependencies, but how is the resolution for all those indirect dependencies? And one of the funny thing is that we introduced somewhere in Maven 2 the usage of exclusions with a wildcard. And I think it was Ant that was not understanding the concept of exclusions. So what it was comparing the group ID and artifact ID with this wildcard, this star, and it didn't match. So the result was it was including everything, whereas the whole idea of using the wildcard exclusion is to exclude everything. So it's exactly the opposite result. So it would be much better if we could make it more explicit in some kind of new file to say, okay, these are really all the dependencies you need to use to build your project. Some other things that we would like to introduce are things like global exclusions. So right now, if you want to get rid of some specific login framework because you would prefer another one, you need to specify that in all of your dependencies. There's no way to do that globally right now. There's also a wish to have a BOM file for plugins. Right now, you can do it for dependencies, but not for plugins. Mixins is the idea of having multiple parents, or having the effect of having multiple parents. But it's kind of complex to solve that. And one is the output encoding. Now you have to specify it with a property, but it would make more sense to have it as part of the POM file itself. So these are all element-based, and in the past we've already tried to add several attributes. And there are not a lot of them, but we try to use them, and they already caused issues. So it made us very clear that we really need to be careful how to work with POM files, how to work with new elements, etc. So we cannot just simply change it. Okay? So right now we have one POM for everything. It contains both the build information, but it also contains the dependency information. And build and dependency information is of course interesting when you're building it right now. But once it is being uploaded, the build information is not that interesting anymore. So you could say, well, maybe we could remove that part. However, the cool part of like it works right now is that the POM file is distributed as is. So the POM file on your local system is uploaded to your remote repository and local repository, of course, as is. So there's no magic, and it is as fast as possible. So this is how it works right now. So we have the build with a POM XML 4.0.0, and when we distribute it, it will be exactly the same POM file. So far, so good. If we want to work with Maven 5, and that is probably the version where we will introduce this 5.0.0 model, what we want is we will build it locally with the model 5, but then we will distribute a 4.0 version of the POM file, so other tools can understand it again. And maybe we can also provide some new files. Like I said, the 4.0 model isn't perfect, so maybe we could introduce some new files that are more capable of new features. For instance, introducing some hashes to really see that you're using an explicit dependency and not getting a different one. These are all kinds of ideas that we could introduce. Yes, Maarten.
Yeah, so is the idea then to always keep distributing this 4.0 version, or eventually deprecate it and go for the 5 version later, or?
Well, I think the 4.0 will stay there for a long time.
Yeah, I agree.
For let's say at least 5 to 10 years, because it is so part of the whole Java ecosystem, because a lot of tools are using it. So once they can understand this new concept of new files, so there is this discussion about the project dependency tree. That would be an optimized file for other tools as well. And I would love to talk with other maintainers of other build tools, of CI servers, or from artifact repository maintainers to come to a new definition how such a file should look like. IDEs are, of course, as important as well, because they need to consume those files as well. But I don't think 4.0 will disappear soon, no.
But that's also a bit of a shame, right? I mean, the newer model could carry all kinds of improvements, and even if I'm able to produce it locally, I cannot share it with fellow developers who also have this newer tooling.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so wouldn't it make sense to someday distribute like the 4 and the 5 version of the POM?
Sure, so that is possible, but we should at least provide the 4.0 version, always.
Yeah, until every old version of Jenkins everywhere around the world. Yeah, which is probably not going to happen within our lifetime.
Maybe we'll see. No, but it's always possible to provide extra POM files, so or other files. That's not the issue, but at least there should be this 4.0 version available.
But you could actually reduce that to its bare minimum, like this is what tools really need to know.
Yes.
Dependencies, probably, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
because of course it's coordinates.
Right.
But then strip away everything that, isn't really needed for a consumer.
Right. So there are a couple of discussions about it, because what do we do with licensing? It is part of the POM file.
Yep.
It's not required to consume, but I think it is important to have it as part of the POM file.
Describes the artifact, right?
Exactly. So there are some elements that are still part of a discussion if they should stay, even if they're consumed but not really useful at that time.
And then there's the Mojo House license Maven plugin, if I recall correctly, that actually aggregates a view of all the licenses that you have for a certain artifact.
Right.
So even if it's not part of Maven standard, there's tooling that requires it to be present.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
So we will be very careful about which elements can be removed from the POM file once it is being distributed. Okay, so what we did is we are using POM transformations, because the POM file itself is XML, and XML has a very powerful way to transform it to a different XML file or whatever. So normally what you would have is, if you read the file from your system, you would get a raw model. And the raw model means as is, including the placeholders for project version or whatever. So they will still need to be resolved. So it is really the raw model. This will change a little bit. And what will happen is, first you will read the file model, and then it will read a second time with this build POM XML model, and that will result in a raw model, as you would normally have. So it is an extra step, and I will explain a little bit later why that is necessary. If we are going to distribute, we will have the same POM file, and it will go again through the build POM XML filter, because you can see it as the enriched version of the file model. And with the consumer POM XML filter, you can reduce the POM file again. So that's only containing the information that's required for distribution and consuming. So that's the whole idea. Build POM will enrich the POM file, consumer will reduce it again a little bit. Okay?
That makes sense.
And why are we using XML files? So one of the things is the license. So if you take a look at what we do at the Apache Software Foundation, is every POM file starts with a license, but it is written as command, XML command. And if you would do normal streaming of this file, you would lose this information. Also, if there are commands in your POM file, those will be lost probably. And also the order of elements. For some that is quite critical, it should be in a specific order. Okay, and by using XML transformation, we can keep this order. So that's, and it seems to be very fast actually. So that's a couple of reasons why I decided to choose XML filters. So this build POM XML filter should result in a valid raw model. So if you take a look at the current validation rules for a raw model, it will say that your parent version must contain a version. And one of the things we can do right now is we can say in the file model, okay, we can remove the version of the parent because we can calculate it based on the relative path. And that's very interesting if you are using a multi-module project, because you can see quite often that the parent POM is a POM file one level above it. So the file model won't contain this version, but the raw model will include it. So then you have a valid raw model again. Okay? So here it is for the parent, but we can also do it for dependencies that are part of the reactor, because that information is also available. If you start your reactor, the first thing that Maven does is loop over all the POM files and try to collect them. And based on that, you could also detect, well, okay, probably you want to use this specific version of the dependency. So people won't make a mistake that it's picking up the wrong dependency because they forgot to update a specific version in a POM file. And we also have CI-friendly placeholders. That's something that was introduced, I think, in 3.5. And that makes it possible to specify the version via the command line. So you can say Jenkins to say, okay, I want to add the build number, so just to make it unique. So these are called CI-friendly placeholders, and they're called. There are only 3 that can be used: the SHA-1, the change list, and the revision. And the problem right now is you need, in case of a multi-module project, you need a plugin to change the POM file, because as we already said in a couple of slides ago, the POM file won't change if it is being uploaded, which means that at that point it cannot know the version anymore, because you were adding some kind of dynamic version from the build server.
And it wasn't written to disk, and
Exactly.
only what is on disk is being distributed, so you kind of lose that information basically.
Yes, you do. That's the whole problem. So if you would ask me if we would have supported CI-friendly placeholders, I say, well, maybe as a feature toggle. We were probably a bit too early to release it. But now that we have this build POM XML filter, we should be able to fix this. Actually, I can prove it already that it works. So for the consumer XML filter, it is about cleaning up a couple of things. And one thing we can do is remove the relative path from the parent, because this is a typical thing that points to a file or directory on your own system. And once it is being uploaded, it ends up on your local repository or some remote repository. And there, this element doesn't make sense anymore. And there's another element which has a similar issue, and those are the modules. They also point to a POM file or a directory. So these are
That's
elements.
Also build information, isn't it?
Exactly.
But you don't really need it if you download that POM.
Right. So these are features that have already been implemented just to prove that the whole concept of build consumer POM works. There is already a first version on the master, but we discovered there is a small issue with it, and that is that if you reverse the order of the modules, it could mean that it is missing some dependencies because it hasn't been built yet, or it is not available yet. We have this graph builder, and what it does, it will reorder your modules based on, okay, so you depend on this, then I need to be built after that dependency. And in this case, we're only working with POM files. So he cannot build that graph yet. So we need this transformer context to decide what to do. It has a couple of things. It can get a raw model by path, which is, of course, interesting for parents, because the parent has a relative path, so it can build up the model by the path. It can do it by a group ID and artifact ID for the dependencies, plugins, extensions, those kinds of things. And we can use user properties. So these were interesting for the CI-friendly versions. These are typical user properties. So those are currently the things that are available in a transformer context. And we have this transformer context builder. And it has 2 phases. It has an initialize phase with the original model build request and a problem collector. So for those who are a little bit familiar, the model build request contains actually all the arguments and the POM file you want to build, and the problem collector collects all the problems, as it says. And the reason for it is if there was no problem collector, you would go from one problem to the next. And now you can get a whole list of all the issues that are in your POM file. It's just more efficient to give you a whole list of the things you need to fix. So this method is being used when you make your build plan. So that's the first time. But as you might remember, is during distribution, it is also going through the same filters. But you don't want to have different information. So for that reason, there's also a build method, and that gives you the immutable version of the same transformer context. Otherwise, you could change your CI-friendly version, system properties, or whatever, and that would be weird, of course, that during your build, there could be a different result than the one that's being uploaded. So that's the reason why we do it like this.
And then basically the transformer context contains everything that can end up in the final distributed POM.
Yes, it contains the information that.
So that's the original POM plus the stuff that you would like to find replace. That's not the exact thing you're doing, but
no, yes,
it's kind of that idea, right?
Exactly.
You can put stuff in the POM that wasn't there when you wrote it, but it lives in that transformer context, and then that's used to populate the POM that you write to, say, target or whatsoever, and that one.
Okay.
Yeah, that one then ends up. Yeah, all right, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I won't show you the real code right now because it is really a huge code base and you will probably get lost. So I hope that if you see these terms, you will, and you go through the code and you say, ah, wait a minute, I think I understand what's happening here. So that's the main reason. So the whole thing about building your multi-module project is about these three classes. So you have a project builder that's responsible for reading the POM file and then seeing which modules are part of it, and then again reading those POM files again. The model builder is responsible for building the effective POM, which means resolving the inheritance, and also, of course, your every placeholder and etc. And the model reader is really the I/O plain old reading the POM file. And what you see is the first time is it will loop over during phase one. It will read the file model and then read over all its modules recursively and read it again and again and again and again until you have the complete multi-module project. And then you will, in phase two, it will loop over all its results. So now we know all the file models that are being used. And based on that, we can build up the effective models. And if there's no raw model yet, you can build it based on the file model. So that's why you need the build context. Yeah, so you can ask on the build context, okay, give me the file model. And of course, you also have the model request, and those two combined can give you the raw model. And this is one of the parts that is really changing compared to how Maven 3 was doing it. And this also made the current commit huge. So I can give you a small example. So this is what phase one was in Maven 3.6.3. So you see a couple of profile activation, raw model normalization. So that means that the paths are being normalized, profile injection, and inheritance. And afterwards, you see all kinds of these things. And if we go to the new one, the list is a little bit longer, But you see that phase 1 is very short now, because it will only collect the file models. And after that, it can use the file model to build up the whole raw model and effective models. Yes, it is huge.
It is huge, yeah.
So this is basically what has been changed, and there is still work to do. So one of the things is the Maven Sign plugin, or the Maven GPT plugin successor. So the current GPT plugin uses the local POM file to sign. But now we know that your uploaded POM file will be different compared to your local POM file. So you should use the uploaded POM file to be signed. And we thought about a new plugin, but right now I'm thinking about, maybe we should just embed it in the Maven deploy plugin, because signing is typically a task for deployments. So that's still a discussion we need to have. I also think that all the packaging plugins, so that's Maven jar, ear, war, or whatever, they all contain a POM file by default. And I think that should be changed to the consumer POM. I don't think that once it is being uploaded, you're talking about the binaries and the POM file that's interesting at that time. So I think it should be changed to the consumer POM. At least it should not be the file POM. That's because that is missing information. For instance, it is missing the version of the parent. So that with that you will lose a lot of information.
Maybe you should even have both, actually, like the thing that we currently have as well as the new one. I don't know.
Maybe. We could also make it optional to say that you want to keep both. But I think the default should be the consumer POM.
So that at least it's the same thing as you would see in the artifact manager.
Exactly. Yes.
Nexus or whatever you use.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So there's
just one question. You can usually also upload your sources, for example, right? Would it make sense then to upload your build POM with the sources instead?
Right, so that's the next plugin that's responsible for that. That's the Maven source plugin.
It's literally down there.
Yes. And
excellent question, though.
Yes, absolutely. But here I don't know which POM file we should use, because the structure of your sources has also been changed. For instance, you could have generated sources that are probably part of your sources jar, but not of your project itself. So there are a couple of things that are not one-to-one mappable.
So yeah, it would definitely make sense then to make it optional to upload them both.
Yes,
but I agree that
so
the consumer plugin would definitely be the one to always upload for sure.
Yes. And of course, we still have the Maven release plugin, which need to update the POM file as well. So these are at least plugins I am aware of that should be changed, and maybe there are more. And with that, I would like to ask everybody to have a look at this issue. This is about the second improvement, about the reversed order of modules, to understand how we can work with it with the build consumer POM. Okay. So what's your first impression? Well, it's not your first impression, of course, but you've already heard about the whole idea.
If only it was the first impression.
Right.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. I think it's powerful, but I also think there's quite some work to do yet in order to be sure that this can actually be used for, how do you say that, for like the full life cycle of a package.
Right.
I mean, right now, yes, we produce, or at least we can produce, a different POM during our build, which is great. But then if the jar plugin or the signing plugin or whatever doesn't use it, then it's effectively it's pretty useless, isn't it?
Right.
So that's quite some job to finish there.
Right.
I would say.
Well, I think the hardest part was really Maven itself, because it was really based on having this POM on your local system, and that was the only POM file that existed. And now we're changing that, so you cannot rely anymore always on this POM file. Sometimes you need to use a different one, a transformed POM file. So these are the first steps, and I expect that we will do some alpha releases first, so that people can get used to it, figure out if they have projects that still work with it. I hope so. The signing part is still something that needs to be fixed, but I'm not sure if everybody needs signing. So for those people that don't sign, they can already use this implementation of Maven.
I think it's something that you see when things are being uploaded to Central. I mean, I've hardly ever seen it inside companies until now, but like the end users of Maven that just do contracting work or something. Well, it's typically just upload your jar and you're good to go. And maybe if you're lucky and they have some shared code base, some library within the company, then they'll upload the sources for that. But even that is often skipped, to my disguise, I have to say. They don't really need to care about signing and whatnot. But as soon as you go to Central or bin tray or whatever location, yeah, then it makes sense to await those improvements.
Right.
The packaging plugins, right?
Exactly.
Did you actually try to build Maven with this feature enabled?
Of course.
Like build Maven itself with itself, of course.
Yes.
That's
yes, and it works.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. Hey, maybe one other question. There's this plugin. It's called the Maven Flatten plugin. You probably know a lot more about it than I do because I've never used it. But I believe there are some similarities to what that can do and to the build consumer mechanism that you have built.
Okay. So I'm also responsible for introducing the Maven Flatten plugin.
Okay.
Or it's a Flatten Maven plugin. Yes. And the reason is both the Maven install and Maven deploy plugin have a flag that is called deploy at end or install at end, and it is a flag. It's working for 90%, I think, and the whole idea is that you want to. It would be frustrating if you are halfway your release and then suddenly the build is broken. And then some of your artifacts have already been uploaded, and well, you cannot upload the same version again. So the reason of that was my idea by introducing these flags, install at end, deploy at end. And then we discovered that some people replaced the POM file just before uploading it or installing it. And this part was now suddenly broken because of my changes. And then they said, okay, we want to have the option back to just override the POM file. And I said, well, let me guess. You first want to have it changed in the install plugin. And once that works, you also want to have it for the deploy plugin. So that means you have to do it twice. That's a bad sign. That's a sign for me that you're doing it wrong. So with that, we started working on the Maven Flat plugin, and that made it possible to, just before you did your install, I think, it will change your POM file. And one of the main things is indeed with the CI-friendly version. That's only possible right now with that plugin to solve that. And we hope that in the end, we do not need this flatten Maven plugin anymore. So it will be a full replacement inside Maven itself.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
that sounds very useful indeed. Yeah, it sounds a bit like we have created the flatten Maven plugin then to accommodate some hacky scenario maybe. But it would be cool to have it included in the core indeed of Maven.
right.
For sure.
So there are some valid reasons why to use this plugin, and it happened before. If there are plugins that have very neat features that we can embed in Maven itself, why not? So that's also the Maven reactor plugin. That part is now the reactor in Maven itself, and there are more examples. So this would also be a good example where some plugin features will be moved to Maven itself.
Cool, thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I hope you liked it, and happy testing. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Cheers, bye-bye.